On a quiet Sunday morning in November 2022, the town of Moscow, Idaho, woke up to something it would never forget. Four bright college students, young, full of life, were found brutally murdered in their rental home near campus. No signs of forced entry. No clear motive. No suspects. Just silence, and blood. The news spread like wildfire. How could something so savage happen in a sleepy college town with barely 25,000 people? As police scrambled for answers, one name slowly surfaced: Brian Kohberger. A 28-year-old criminology PhD student, just miles away, quietly observing from the shadows. What was he doing in the weeks before the killings? What did he know? And why were his eyes suddenly locked on by investigators? The case would grip a nation and tear open questions no one wanted to ask. This isn't just about murder. It's about the darkness we never see coming. Hit like, subscribe, and let's go. Before the headlines, before the horror, life in Moscow, Idaho moved slowly, comfortably. It was a town of pine trees, quiet streets, and the warm buzz of a college campus nestled in routine. The University of Idaho students lived in a bubble of study groups, weekend parties, and late-night pizza runs. Among them were Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan, friends, roommates, young souls tangled in everyday joy. Just down the road, in neighboring Pullman, Brian Kohberger lived a different kind of rhythm. A 28-year-old graduate student at Washington State University, he was pursuing a PhD in criminology. Focused. Reserved. Often seen alone, lost in thought. He had a sharp mind for crime theories and a growing fascination with the criminal psyche. To most, he was just another quiet academic with dark-rimmed glasses and a structured routine. But in the stillness of that ordinary world, something was beginning to stir. Something no one could see, yet. It started with a whisper. Just past 4 a.m. on November 13, 2022, a 911 call shattered the calm. Inside the rental home on King Road, something was terribly wrong. First responders arrived to a scene unlike anything they'd faced before. No forced entry. No sign of struggle in the common areas. Yet 4 lives were gone, taken with shocking precision. The town held its breath. Students clung to each other, parents demanded answers, and police combed through the scene, searching for meaning in the silence. Meanwhile, across the state line, Brian Kohberger went to class. Quiet. Composed. The same man who days earlier had led discussions on criminal behavior, now grading papers and keeping to himself. But beneath that stillness, something didn't sit right. Surveillance footage. Cell tower data. A white Hyundai Elantra. Threads began to pull. The patterns didn't make sense, yet. But the air had changed. Something deeper was coming. And this was only the beginning. As investigators peeled back layers of the crime, the puzzle only twisted further. Security footage from the early hours of November 13 showed a white Hyundai Elantra driving near the scene, multiple times. Odd. Unsettling. The car didn't belong to any of the victims. And then came the phone data, a signal from a phone that had pinged near the house not once, but at least 12 times before the murders. The same phone went silent during the critical window, only to switch back on miles away, hours later. That number. It led to Brian Kohberger. Still, he hadn't been arrested. No one had. And yet, something was off. Students began leaving campus early. People double-locked their doors. Online, theories exploded, but police remained silent. Meanwhile, Brian kept to his routine, walking the halls with a dead calm. Some classmates later said his eyes looked heavier. Like he knew something he wasn't saying. Like he was carrying something no one could see. The tension was building, and the clock was ticking. On December 30th, 2022, everything snapped into focus. At 3 a.m., across the country in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania, a SWAT team moved in. Brian Kohberger was taken into custody at his parents' home, alive, silent, and without resistance. The arrest shocked everyone. A man studying criminal behavior, now accused of committing one of the most chilling crimes in recent memory. The public stared in disbelief. But for investigators, the pieces had finally clicked. Genetic genealogy had linked DNA from the crime scene, found on a knife sheath, to Kohberger. A microscopic trace, left behind like a signature in blood. That was the moment everything changed. He wasn't just a student anymore. He became the center of a national firestorm. And in that instant, the quiet, analytic figure transformed in the public eye, into the prime suspect. The courtroom was coming. The secrets were unraveling. And no one could look away. As the investigation plunged deeper into Brian Kohberger's life, chilling truths began to surface. Friends and classmates described a man brilliant yet distant, obsessed with crime scenes and violence in ways that unsettled even those close to him. Text messages revealed dark thoughts, cryptic warnings, and a growing obsession with control. But the most shocking discovery lay in his online searches, details about how to avoid detection, ways to cover a trail, methods chillingly precise. This was no accidental involvement, it was calculated. The horror multiplied as the reality sank in, for young lives had been stolen by someone who understood the law, and how to break it. The community's grief turned to anger and fear, but for Brian, the weight was heavier. Behind those quiet eyes lurked a storm, a mixture of guilt, defiance, and something darker still. The courtroom was no longer just a place of judgment. It was a battleground for truth. And the world was watching. The summer of 2025 brought a boiling point. As Brian Kohberger faced mounting evidence, the weight of the trial pressed heavily on him, and the entire community. The courtroom became an arena where truth clashed with silence, where every word could tip the scales of justice. Yet behind the scenes, shadowy forces stirred, media frenzy twisting facts, legal battles delaying justice, and public opinion teetering between rage and doubt. For Brian, it wasn't just about proving innocence or guilt, it was about confronting the darkest parts of himself. The pressure built, forcing him to make choices that could seal his fate or shatter what little remained of his world. Meanwhile, the victims' families waited, desperate for closure. The question lingered in the air, would justice be served, or would the truth be buried beneath layers of deception? What happens next could change everything. As the trial dragged on into late 2025, a devastating blow struck the prosecution's case. Key evidence was challenged and some witnesses began to waver under pressure. Doubt seeped into the courtroom like a cold fog. For the victims' families, hope felt fragile, slipping through their fingers. Brian, once a shadow in the background, now seemed untouchable, his silence almost deafening. The community's faith in justice was shaken, and many wondered, is this the end? Could this nightmare unravel without truth ever coming to light? But just when darkness seemed absolute, a new piece of evidence surfaced, an overlooked detail, a hidden message buried in the chaos. It was faint, almost missed, but it flickered like a candle in the night. A sign that maybe, just maybe, the fight was far from over. And hope was still alive. In a dramatic turn during early 2026, fresh testimony emerged from an unexpected witness, a former classmate who had remained silent out of fear. Their words revealed critical details that pierced the shadows around Brian Kohberger. Suddenly, the pieces began to realign. New forensic analysis confirmed evidence previously questioned, strengthening the prosecution's case beyond doubt. For the families, relief mingled with sorrow, a bittersweet victory for justice long delayed. Brian's carefully constructed facade began to crumble as the truth took center stage. The courtroom transformed from a battlefield into a place where accountability finally found its voice. In that moment, the weight of years of pain and uncertainty lifted just enough to allow a flicker of peace. The nightmare was far from over, but the path forward had become clear. Justice was no longer just a hope, it was within reach. The trial of Brian Kohberger marked the end of one chapter but the beginning of many questions. For the families, a painful closure mingled with enduring grief. For the community of Moscow, Idaho, life would never return to the same quiet calm. The case exposed shadows hidden in plain sight, reminders that evil often wears familiar faces. Brian remains a symbol of a dark mystery that still echoes in courtrooms and hearts alike. But what does justice truly mean when lives are shattered beyond repair? How do we heal when the worst happens in places we thought were safe? The story doesn't end with a verdict. It challenges us all to look deeper, to listen closer, and to never take safety for granted. What would you do if faced with a truth too hard to accept? Hit subscribe, share your thoughts, and let's keep the conversation going.